still a little bit of believing that it's sort of real. So we're sort of in the middle somewhere. But because of that, we're not fully believing it's real, which means that if you're sort of lucid, you'll find that in the dream, you'll have less craving attachment for pleasant, less aversion to unpleasant. But if you are 100% lucid, 100%, it'd be impossible to have attachment to anything pleasant or aversion, unpleasant, because we know that there's nothing out there to grab or push against. It's in product of the mind. So similarly here, that once we first start meditating on this, and we have a bit of an experience, and there's some residual effect after the meditation, it's like being a little bit lucid in the dream. And to the amount that you're lucid in the dream, to that amount you reduce your craving and attachment. Same, to the amount that this is affecting your mind after, to that amount, to that degree, there will be a reduction in mental afflictions.
Glen, we try to make all what we are talking about very analytic, and not to take things for granted. And but I have to say that this thing with the states of ignorance from beginningless time is an axioma.
It is like a
axioma.
Theory?
Yes,
sure.
It's axioma in the theory, and we build the whole building on this. Like in mathematics, I don't know, is it the word in English?
Postulate.
Postulate.
Yes.
Assumption.
Not assumption, but I don't know how to say
Axiom.
it. Axiom. That we don't prove it and we don't analyze it, but we say this is so.
Because this is what people discovered.
Okay, but we cannot...
So it's the same. I mean, it's the same in science. If a scientist runs an experiment and they discover something,
you can repeat it.
I mean, they run it many times to be sure that it's true.
Yes.
Not only that, they do peer review. They check other scientists who are running the same experiment, see if they got the same result. And if there's peer review agreement, then they publish and say, this is it. But then we in the public, we go, yeah, I think Einstein knows what he's talking about. I accept that. But for us, it's pure speculation. We don't know. We're trusting them.
And the analog?
So here, same, the Buddha ran the experiment, thousands of contemplatives over the centuries have run the experiment, they've come up with this result, peer review, they all seem to agree that this is what they experienced, and this is what being presented here. But again, for us to go, yeah, that's true, I'll accept that, it's of no help. We need to check it out. We need to run the experiment.
This is what I'm saying. That about the beginningless time and the ignorance existing from beginningless time.
That's what they experienced.
We cannot...
We can see that. That's the assertion. We can discover this through direct experience.
The beginningless time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Why is it important?
No. I think the point is that it seems like a lot of this is built on some sort of unstable basis or something.
Maybe it started 2 million years ago. So why would it bother me in this?
No, but I think she has a valid point. She's got a valid point here. And what I'm suggesting is that we shouldn't take things on assumption, and that what these texts are saying is, here's what we discovered, and here's how you test it for yourself. Up to us if we test it. If we don't test it, it's just another theory. May or may not be true, may or may not be helpful. And it's merely accepting it or rejecting it, of course, is no use, because we need to check it out ourselves if we want to. If we don't want to, that's okay. But the assertion is, if we check it out, we'll get this result. And of course, it's not just so that we get smart. The whole purpose of doing the experiment is to overcome suffering. So that's the goal of the whole thing. So again, it's just up to us to check it out and see whether it's true or not, and see whether it benefits. And so if you want to do the experiment, we do the experiment and see what happens. That's it.
How do you do the experiment?
Exactly this way. You get functioning equipment through the Shamatha practice, and then you investigate in this. This is one way, and we're going to do in the next session this afternoon, we're going to do another type of investigation. In this next session this afternoon, we're going to investigate the mind. Here we were looking at the person, so we're going to investigate the mind. Is there a findable mind there somewhere? So we're going to do another different investigation in that session. So, of course, we can, like a scientist, we can run experiments from a number of different ways.
I accepted it completely what you explained. I'm asking about her question. How do you run that experiment?
Which experiment?
About
From
2
beginnings.
million years.
The ignorance started from beginner's time.
Yeah, because you get to see, the experiment is you get to see the nature of the mind. You get to see the nature of the mind, and you get to see these things. But again, don't take my word for it. Check it out. Maybe it's just a story.
Maybe the axioma is earlier, how they define the nature of the mind.
Sorry?
The definition of the nature of the mind, how they, from beginner's time, define it.
Not sure what you mean.
What is the nature of the mind? If everything is clear, what is the nature of the mind?
You're talking about conventional nature or ultimate nature?
Ultimate nature.
Emptiness,
Emptiness.
like everything.
Like
That's the assertion here, of course.
Yeah. So the ignorance is coming on the assumption that there is something, there is emptiness.
No, the ignorance is...
thing on the emptiness. We
So-
cover it.
Yeah, the ignorance is obscuring that,
Obscuring
the nature of the mind,
the
yeah.
nature of the mind. I
Yeah.
want to ask how it relates to
Imputation.
Projections.
projection. For everything, because we project all the time on everything according to the seeds of ignorance and so forth.
Yeah, so you mean by projection, you don't just mean labeling. You're not
Yeah.
talking about that, are you?
No, like
You're talking about projecting that this
I-
cup exists independent of us.
yeah, we project of everything. We project on the hill, we project on our emotions,
Sure.
we project everything. And if we will know that we all the time project according to our seed of education, everything, so we have to take out, I mean, emptiness is somehow,
It's the antidote to that projection.
it's
So if we realize emptiness, projection is...
It's projecting God. So you can walk, you can make a meditation of projection, how you project.
Right, but it meant...
So if it will give the same result.
I mean, what do you mean by a meditation on projection?
Let's say about anger. Like
Right.
you said, if I will check out why I'm angry, what
Yeah, but this is all conventional. See, this is all conventional investigation. It's not investigating the nature of anger, the ultimate nature of anger, or the person or the
So
object.
you think we cannot go deeper and say, okay, if I understand that I'm angry because I'm projecting about something of
Right,
somebody,
but-
as
Yeah, and you can come to
So I
see...
become-
Exactly, you can come to see that I am getting angry because I'm grasping onto independent me.
yeah, okay.
But then to get rid of that independent me, you need to investigate that. And that's what this practice is. So yeah, this sort of investigation can be helpful to see how grasping actually causes all of these mental afflictions, yes. But then to get rid of that grasping, we need to look at the grasping directly and through this emptiness practice. Yeah.
In science, usually we keep...
In science?
Yes, we keep the events quite far from us. And in Buddhism, we
So you keep the
I say
event?
that usually in science, when we research something,
Right.
we keep the event far from us.
You mean you're being objective instead of being subjective? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
And in Buddhism, we research it by ourselves. And I think
Ah.
it's unique for Buddhism, and it's nice.
Yeah, of course, yeah, there's a difference is that in science, generally, where it's through third-person perspective, we're using some mathematics or some equipment to discover something, and then we're interpreting those results. Whereas, of course, here, what's unique in Buddhism is, of course, it's first-person perspective. But, of course, to use that, the mind needs to be an effective tool, and that's why we need shamatha. Otherwise, we can come up with all sorts of ideas. And unfortunately, you know, I think in the late 20th century, late 19th century, early 20th century, there was this introspection movement in this area. William James and a few other modern-day philosophers who really understood the value of this, but it sort of died after 20 or 30 years because they had no way, or they apparently didn't know about Buddhism, but this is all in America and Europe, and they had no way to train the attention. So, of course, then the results that they got from first-person observation were very unreliable because this person said this person said that, and then, of course, it got thrown out the window because it was not reliable. So it was unfortunate that they didn't seem to have access to these tools of shamatha. It would have been interesting if they had.
Here we take the conclusions for ourselves, and it's not an inclusion. Maybe
well, it is an inclusion.
We can make conclusions, however, the main idea is what we see directly and take with us.
Sure. And of course, we can still have that peer review like in science, because you have different scientists in different labs with different equipment running the same experiment, coming up with a result, and then sort of comparing how they went. And this is one way, I think, in science of really establishing something, because if there's only one scientist in one lab that comes up with some result, maybe the equipment or something is not really okay. So if they run it multiple times in multiple places with multiple different people, and everyone comes up with the same result, then, there's more validity to that. So similarly here, we may run the experiment, come up with some sort of result, and that maybe we're sort of hallucinating, But if we have thousands of people running the same experiment, coming up to the same result, then there's more likely. And of course, one way to really validate our experiment is that the assertion is here that through running the experiment, it reduces and eliminates mental afflictions and suffering and increases loving kindness and compassion for others. So that's also a way to validate the experiment.
But also the goal is different.
Of course, yeah.
In research, we try to make conclusions. And here, we want to have individual development or something like that.
We have what, sorry?
We want to have individual development
well, of course.
Also for others.
Sure.
It's from our point of view.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Just a comment. There are a lot of people that have compassion and doing things for refugees, or I don't know, and are so far from finding emptiness.
Sure. Of course.
I'm being angry about what's happening in Syria, but it's not an anger that, where's the me in here? It doesn't belong to me. Just a sense of responsibility of what's happening.
And of course, the Buddha's assertion is that the more that we can let go of this grasping, the more effective we can be in everything we do. The more effective our compassionate work in the world can be, because there's a lot of people out doing a lot of compassionate work, but if their mind is full of mental afflictions, then something difficult comes their way, then it becomes a bit of a problem. So I'm not suggesting we all have to become Buddhists. In fact, that's probably not a good idea at all. But I think if we want to be a positive impact, compassionate work in the world, we need to have a look at our wisdom, our framework for doing that compassionate work, to make sure that it's better and better and better, so we're more effective in helping others.
So you can come to emptiness in the back door.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to be a Buddhist to realise emptiness.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Does the false self creates itself?
Is the what, sorry?
Does the false self create itself?
Creates itself. Does the false... Well, the false self doesn't exist. The independent me doesn't exist, but we believe that it exists. So...
It's the belief that it creates itself. It's the same.
Well, it's from this chart. It's a seed of ignorance. It's our habit of grasping that leads to grasping. Is that the question? Oh, I didn't think so. What's the question?
It's a self-creation.
way.
Self-creation? No, because the independent me doesn't exist. It can't. So a non-existent can't create anything.
We perceive it as something. That
We think it exists, and that grasping to it, that's what creates it.
Okay, second question. During meditation, the more you asked questions, the more everything became totally clear, and it was just happening. It was a happening. I have no words to describe it. There was no body, no nothing.
Sure,
Just
sure.
happening. And the more you asked questions, I heard the questions. How can I describe that? I heard the questions, but there was no one
doing anything.
No one who could reply or answer or
Do something about it.
Those questions
sure,
came
sure.
somewhere and they were just evaporated like.
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah. If we have an experience of emptiness, and then I'm talking now direct experience, and we come out of that experience, and then someone says, "Tell me your experience," we would go. It was sort of space-like. It was sort of, I don't know, There was not really a sort of a me there, or you can't put it into words, because a direct realization of emptiness is a direct realization there's no duality. It's a non-dualistic experience. And of course language is dualistic, so you can't use language to describe something that's non-dualistic. You can just use some sort of analogies or something. It was like sort of space, and like sort of space. And in fact, this meditation is sometimes called space-like emptiness practice, because space is like an absence of something, and emptiness is an absence of independent me. But you won't be able to describe it directly.
There was some sensation of sort of love or very deep connection to
Yeah. As I mentioned, and then we take a break now, is that realization, the flip side, or the essence of that, the flip side is dependent arising. So that experience, the natural expression of that is love and compassion. That's
very hard to get out of. Very hard.
Okay, let's take a break. And then in the next session, we'll look at the practice of looking for the mind.
So Mahamudra.
Yeah, so we're going to do a Mahamudra practice in the next session.